He abandoned her when she was carrying his child. He never imagined that years later, the life he thought he could forget would drive straight into his world, and force him to confront everything he ran from. This is the story of love, sacrifice, and a truth that cannot be ignored. Before we continue, please like this video, subscribe to this channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comment section. The city never slept. Lagos glittered like a living jewel, skyscrapers piercing the sky, their glass facades reflecting the first hesitant rays of dawn. The streets were alive with a rhythm of engines, vendors, and hurried footsteps, ambition moving through the city like a river that could not be dammed. Car horns blared, motorcycles weaved through traffic, and the aroma of fresh bread and roasted corn wafted through alleys where early risers hawked their wares. Yet, above all this life, in a penthouse perched high on the tallest tower in the city's financial district, the world seemed suspended in silence. Chief Obinna Eze, 47, a billionaire whose empire stretched across continents, sat alone in his office. The lights of Lagos spilled beneath him like scattered gold. From this height, he could see everything: the chaos, the promise, the dreams and desperation of a city that never rested. And yet he felt nothing. From the outside, he had everything: influence, power, wealth that could move nations, and a reputation that commanded awe and fear. He had built towers, controlled industries, and shaped governments. Yet in the quiet hours of the night, when no one was watching, Obinna felt the emptiness that no amount of money could ever fill. His desk was immaculate: pristine glass, polished mahogany, contracts neatly stacked, awards glittering under soft lighting. But all of it, every accolade, every signature, every conquest, could not mask the mistake that had defined him in ways he refused to name. A woman's face haunted him. Chinyere. The one he had loved fiercely, with a kind of passion that consumed him and terrified him all at once. She had been everything: soft-spoken yet unafraid, beautiful without vanity, the kind of woman who could make a man feel invincible and vulnerable simultaneously. And she had carried his child. Fear and ambition had ruled him then. The allure of power, of opportunity, had been irresistible. He left her with promises he never kept, blinded by the lure of boardrooms, contracts, and deals worth millions. He had convinced himself it was the only way forward. But years later, that choice lingered, refusing to fade. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, he would wake to find her face pressed against his eyelids in memory. The sound of her laughter, soft yet certain, would echo in the halls of his mind. The whispered words he could not answer, or would not answer, replayed endlessly. "You will not walk away from what is yours." Years passed. Obinna rose to heights few could imagine. Newspapers called him visionary. Competitors called him ruthless. Governments courted him, and markets followed his movements like a tide. Yet every accolade, every victory, every deal, could not erase the ghost of the life he had abandoned. This morning, like every morning, Obinna rose before the sun. His reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a man impeccably dressed in tailored suits, shoes polished to mirror shine, hair perfectly styled. Every inch of him projected confidence, authority, and command, but his eyes betrayed the truth: a hollowness carved by years of regret. "Another meeting with investors," his assistant reminded him, clipboard in hand, voice clipped and professional. Obinna nodded, a polite smile barely touching his lips. His mind, however, drifted far from financial reports and profit margins. He walked the length of his mansion slowly, almost ceremonially, as though the polished marble floors themselves reminded him of the time he had spent walking away from what truly mattered. The silence of the house pressed in on him. No laughter bounced off the walls. No footsteps ran down the corridors. No small hands tugged at his coat or his attention. Only the soft echo of his own measured steps and the quiet hum of luxury. Fountains, chandeliers, priceless paintings, and furniture imported from the finest artisans across the world. Wealth surrounded him, yet warmth had never lived here. He paused by the library, running a hand across books that chronicled the wisdom of centuries. Wisdom he had collected, stored, and ignored. He recalled moments of potential joy lost. A child's laugh he would never hear, a woman's touch he would never feel again, a family he had abandoned. Obinna sat for a moment, pressing his temples with fingers that had commanded empires yet could not command his own heart. Regret, he whispered to himself, is a luxury for the weak. But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. It was a weight he could never escape, no matter how high he climbed, no matter how much the world bowed to him. Little did he know, destiny had a way of returning what was once lost. The world he had built with ambition and cold precision, the skyscrapers, the businesses, the fame, the fortune, would soon collide with the life he had abandoned. And the man who thought he controlled everything would find that the greatest power lies not in wealth, but in confronting what he had long ignored. The child he never knew, the family he never claimed, and the chance to rebuild what he had destroyed. The city roared beneath him, oblivious. And yet, high above in his empty kingdom, Obinna Eze waited unknowingly for the moment that would change everything. Obinna Eze had long ago learned to trust wealth, contracts, and influence more than people. Relationships were measured by utility, loyalty was rare, and trust was reserved for numbers on spreadsheets. His office staff, managers, and even the investors who bowed to his commands were part of the machinery of his life, useful cogs in a world he had built with precision. So, when his assistant announced the arrival of a new driver, Obinna barely looked up from the latest set of quarterly reports. "Make sure he knows the rules," he said, voice crisp, practiced, detached, a tone that had built empires and kept employees in line. A moment later the man arrived. He was ordinary in appearance, or so it seemed. A black African man, early 40s, lean yet sturdy, with a calm confidence that could have been mistaken for quiet humility. His clothes were simple but neat, his shoes polished but unassuming. He bowed slightly, the gesture subtle yet deliberate, like a man who knew the weight of responsibility. "My name is Chaik, sir," he said, his voice even and composed. Obinna's eyes scanned him quickly, noting the posture, the careful movements, the understated efficiency. Nothing remarkable, he told himself. Another driver. Another employee to move through the vast machinery of his life without leaving a mark. Yet, as Chaik parked the sleek black luxury car outside the office and returned to stand at attention, Obinna felt a flicker of unease. It was not strength, not confidence, not obedience, but something else. Quiet certainty. A presence that suggested a life shaped by responsibility heavier than anything Obinna had ever considered. The quiet observer. Chaik worked in silence. He learned the routes of Lagos with careful precision, memorized the mansion's every corner, and adapted seamlessly to Obinna's often impossible expectations. Where other drivers grumbled or fumbled, Chaik moved like a shadow, present, efficient, and unobtrusive. Weeks passed. Obinna, a man accustomed to control and distraction, began noticing subtle things. Small patterns that made him pause. The way Chaik anticipated his coffee order, exactly how he liked it, without being asked. The way he remembered details of meetings without notes. The way he treated staff, not with fear, not with condescension, but with quiet respect. It was a dignity born not from title, from money, or from fear, but from life itself. From experience carved by hardship and love. From choices made when no one was watching. Obinna could not explain it, and at first, he tried not to notice. But slowly, a sense of intrigue grew. He found himself observing the driver more often than necessary, testing him with small tasks, asking trivial questions. Chaik answered calmly, precisely, never boastful, never timid. Each response seemed to carry a depth, a wisdom beyond ordinary measure. A name that stirred memory. One afternoon, as Obinna passed through the hallway, he overheard Chaik speaking softly to the housekeeper. "Yes, Mama Ada," Chaik said, voice gentle yet firm. Obinna froze mid-step. Mama Ada. A shiver ran through him. The name tugged at the edges of a memory he had long tried to bury. A connection too faint, too fleeting to fully grasp. He pushed it aside, telling himself it was nothing. Coincidences happened. Names repeated. Life moved on. Yet something deep in his chest refused to let it go. A faint, unplaceable pull, a whisper from the past, brushing against the present, demanding attention. The unseen connection. The days stretched on, and the tension deepened, subtle as a shadow shifting in sunlight. Obinna noticed the way Chaik moved through the mansion, quiet yet commanding respect without ever needing to assert it. He began testing the man, calling him for tasks that were small on paper but revealing in nature. Fetch the files from the third-floor archive. Bring the blueprints to my office. Check on the garden staff. And every time, Chaik responded with calm exactitude. No hesitancy, no fear, no complaint. Obinna's curiosity became an obsession. He could not explain the draw he felt to this man. The precision, the restraint, the intelligence, patience, and above all, the faint aura of something familiar, a tether he could not yet name. He did not know that Chaik carried a secret, a life built on sacrifice, a child he had raised, nurtured, and protected, a child who, unbeknownst to Obinna, carried his own blood, the child he had abandoned long ago. And very soon that secret, silent and unassuming, would reach across the years. It would step into Obinna's world not as a whisper, but as an undeniable force, a past he had tried to ignore, a life he had failed to claim, and a truth that would not wait any longer. Chaik's days unfolded in quiet diligence. He drove Obinna's sleek black cars through the congested arteries of Lagos with seamless precision, navigating potholes and chaos like a conductor leading an orchestra of honking horns and weaving motorcycles. He handled deliveries, managed errands, checked the mansion's staff schedules, and ensured the day-to-day machine of Obinna Eze's empire never faltered. Yet beneath this unassuming routine, there was a vigilance in Chaik's eyes, a careful, watchful patience that no one noticed, not the staff, not the security, not the business associates who came and went like ghosts. Obinna, despite his brilliance in business and strategy, had never learned to read people the way Chaik did. The patterns, the subtle shifts in tone, the unspoken cues, the driver noticed all of it. And slowly, very slowly, Obinna began to notice him. The signs that went unnoticed began with small things. A suggestion offered politely, yet with the firmness of experience. A route changed without complaint to avoid traffic, saving not just time but potential stress. A meal prepared exactly as Obinna preferred, without being asked twice or reminded. At first, Obinna mistook it for loyalty or efficiency. But the moments multiplied, subtle and layered. Each tiny gesture hinted at knowledge far beyond ordinary training. An intuition, almost instinctive, that seemed familial. Chaik spoke to staff with quiet authority, not as a master, but as someone who understood the weight of responsibility. His presence commanded respect without demanding it. The mansion, long silent under Obinna's iron will, seemed to breathe differently when Chaik moved through it. Lighter, warmer, almost alive. The night of silence. One evening, Lagos glittered below like spilled gold. The mansion was quiet, save for the hum of air conditioning and distant traffic. Obinna sat in his office, reports and contracts spread across the mahogany desk. The night had grown long, stretching into hours of solitude and calculation. A soft knock broke the silence. "Sir," Chaik said, entering with a tray of tea, the steam curling in the low lamplight. Obinna barely looked up. "Leave it here," he muttered, distracted. But something, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps the first in years, compelled him to study the man fully. Chaik stood, poised yet unassuming. Calm posture, steady eyes, a subtle confidence that spoke of a life shaped by weighty responsibility. The kind of life that Obinna could not imagine from behind his desk, surrounded by wealth and influence. "Chaik," Obinna said slowly, testing the name aloud. "Where are you from?" Chaik froze for an imperceptible heartbeat. Then, with perfect composure, he replied, "From everywhere I was needed, sir." The words lingered, strange in their simplicity, yet heavy with meaning. Obinna felt the stirrings of a memory he could not yet place, a familiarity he could not explain. The seed of doubt. Days bled into weeks. Obinna found himself observing Chaik more than he should. Not with suspicion exactly, but with curiosity, and a growing uneasy recognition. He asked trivial questions just to hear the answers. He noticed the way Chaik moved through the mansion. The way he interacted with staff, with security, even with the children of the household staff. Every movement, every gesture, carried a dignity and awareness that seemed out of place for a driver, yet perfectly natural. One afternoon, as Chaik bent over his wallet while tidying a drawer, Obinna glimpsed a small photograph, partially hidden, handled with care. "What is that?" he asked, voice steady but heart racing. Chaik looked up, calm as ever. "A reminder, sir, of why some things are worth protecting." Obinna felt a sharp pang. Something inside him stirred, a memory long buried. A woman's face, soft and resolute. Promise made and broken. A life abandoned. And suddenly, the emptiness he had carried for decades felt heavier, closer, undeniable. The first hint of connection. Then came the day that began to unravel everything. Chaik was tasked with delivering urgent documents to a crucial board meeting. Obinna followed in the passenger seat of the sleek car, ostensibly to ensure efficiency, but in truth, his attention was elsewhere. He watched Chaik interact with the world. How he greeted the guards, not with flattery, but respect. How he navigated the office reception, moving with calm authority. How he spoke, the cadence of his voice precise, measured, familiar in a way that tugged at something deep within Obinna. When they stopped, sunlight struck Chaik's face. Obinna's chest tightened. Every detail, the steady eyes, the quiet strength, the controlled patience, resonated with memories he had tried to bury for decades. It was then that fear, real and unspoken, rose in Obinna's chest for the first time in decades. Not fear of loss, not fear of business failure, but the fear of what he might finally discover, the truth he had been running from. Chaik, for his part, carried the knowledge of a secret carefully guarded. He had raised a child, nurtured and protected him as if he were his own, instilling values, resilience and patience. That child, 22-year-old Kelechi Eze, carried the blood of the man sitting beside him, though neither knew it yet. And though Obinna could not yet see it, the invisible tether, the connection that had lain dormant, was beginning to pull. Slowly, imperceptibly, inexorably, the past was moving toward him. The silence of decades was about to be broken. The truth, quiet and patient, had begun its approach. And soon, the billionaire's carefully ordered world would collide with a life he had abandoned, changing everything. Obinna Eze had always believed he controlled everything. Business, influence, wealth, reputation. Even the people around him moved according to the rhythms he dictated. He had spent decades building a life where power was the language and obedience the currency. But nothing, no strategy, no calculated move, no amount of money, could have prepared him for the moment when the truth arrived. Not with a bang, not with accusation, but quietly, like a shadow slipping across a sunlit room. The unexpected revelation. It began on an ordinary morning. The Lagos streets were alive with their usual symphony. Car horns blaring, street vendors calling, motorcycles weaving through traffic like silver streaks. Yet inside the sleek black luxury car, silence dominated. Obinna sat in the passenger seat, fingers drumming lightly on the leather armrest, mind racing with the unease he had tried to ignore for weeks. Chaik drove calmly, hands steady on the wheel, eyes attentive yet serene. His composure was unnerving. Every movement, every subtle glance, every quiet correction of traffic patterns carried a precision that suggested life experience far beyond a typical driver. Obinna watched him closely, almost unconsciously. He tried to articulate the flickers of familiarity, the quiet authority, the instinctive care, the dignity in every gesture. Something about Chaik seemed different, almost intimate in a way Obinna could not yet place. Then, as if breaking through years of silence, Chaik spoke. "Sir, there's something you need to know." Obinna stiffened. The air seemed heavier, pressing down on him. His chest tightened, a cold ripple of fear running through him. "What is it?" he asked, voice sharper than intended, betraying his calm facade. Chike took a measured breath, steady and unflinching. "The child you abandoned. The one you never met. I raised him as my own." Time stopped. Obinna's hands clenched the leather armrest. Memories, buried, ignored and forbidden, rushed back. Chinyer's soft, pleading eyes. Her trembling voice telling him she carried his child. The fear, the pride, the ambition that had driven him away. The life he had chosen over love. He wanted to speak, to demand clarification, to deny it. But words failed him. His mouth opened, then closed. Only the silence remained. The son who returned. Chike's voice cut through the tension, steady, unwavering. "He is here, sir. He has grown into a man of integrity, of strength, of wisdom. And soon, you will meet him." Obinna felt the weight of decades crash down on him. Every empire he had built, every deal he had closed, every nod of fear or admiration from colleagues. Suddenly it seemed hollow. He had mastered everything except the one thing that mattered. Fatherhood. The car stopped outside a modest house, tucked quietly behind the shadows of towering skyscrapers. The walls were unassuming, the garden simple but well kept. Chike turned to him. "He is waiting, sir. Are you ready to face the truth?" Obinna's throat tightened. Pride, fear, guilt, and anticipation collided in a storm. He swallowed hard. "Yes," he whispered finally. I have to know." The moment of reckoning. Inside the house, sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the room in golden warmth. Standing near the window was a young man. Strong, composed, confident, yet humble. A black African man, 22, whose eyes held a mix of curiosity, caution, and quiet strength. "Sir," Chike said softly, standing a step behind. Obinna's gaze fell upon the young man. And in that instant, decades of memory surged forth. The child he had left behind, abandoned in fear and pride, now fully grown. "Chike, this is him," Obinna whispered, disbelief cracking his voice. Chike nodded, steady as ever. "Yes, sir. This is your son." Obinna's knees weakened. The billionaire, accustomed to commanding armies of people and entire industries, found himself trembling. He had faced hostile boards, market crashes, and rivals who would stop at nothing, but nothing had prepared him for this. The moment of reckoning, the confrontation with the life he had denied, was far more potent than any business battle. The young man took a step forward, measured, dignified, and calm. His posture mirrored Chike's in its quiet strength, yet carried his own essence, an inheritance not of money, but of life, resilience, and love. The silent lesson. Obinna's voice broke. I failed him," he admitted, a confession decades in the making. Chike shook his head gently. "You did not fail him. Life brought him to me. I raised him because love and responsibility are stronger than blood." Tears welled in Obinna's eyes. A life once dominated by power and strategy now revealed its emptiness in comparison to this fragile, undeniable truth. The lessons he had never learned in boardrooms or negotiation tables, the lessons of patience, sacrifice, humility, and love, were now laid bare before him. Obinna turned slowly toward his son, words caught in his throat. The young man met his gaze with calm assurance, not anger or resentment, but understanding. A bond long denied was now unfolding, tentative, fragile, yet powerful in its authenticity. For the first time in decades, Obinna felt it. The weight of a parent's love, the responsibility of presence, the meaning of connection. Blood alone had never defined a father. Presence, guidance, sacrifice, and unwavering care had done more than any DNA ever could. And in that quiet sunlit room, with two men who had both carried his legacy, one by choice, one by blood, the billionaire began to understand. True power was not in wealth or influence. True power was in family, in love, in the courage to face the consequences of one's choices. The mansion felt different that evening. Not because its walls had changed, The marbles still gleamed, the chandeliers caught the last rays of sunlight, and Lagos buzzed endlessly beyond the gates. But because the man who had once walked these halls as a ruler, a force to be reckoned with, had changed. Obinna Eze, 47, the billionaire whose name alone commanded influence across continents, walked through the halls not with authority, but with awareness. Each step carried humility, each glance carried curiosity, each pause carried reflection. For decades, he had measured success in deals, acquisitions, and power. Now he measured it in presence, in patience, in human connection. The first steps. He found his son, 22-year-old black African Kelechi Eze, in the library. Kelechi sat at the large oak table, absorbed in a book whose contents were lost on Obinna. Yet he noticed the calm focus, the posture, the quiet diligence, the same calm concentration he had once admired in Chike, the man who had raised him. Kelechi looked up, and a gentle, almost shy smile spread across his face. Obinna's chest tightened. Words formed and faltered in his throat. Kelechi. How could he apologize for decades of absence? For every missed birthday, every unshared laugh, every lesson left unlearned. For every moment of fear, pride, and ambition that had taken him away from the son he now saw before him. Kelechi stood slowly, measured, composed. "It's okay, sir," he said softly. "I have been raised by love already. But I am here now. That is enough." Obinna swallowed hard. The humility of this young man, his son, struck him more deeply than any success, any award, any empire he had ever built. It was a quiet power, one that no wealth could purchase. The lesson of sacrifice. Chike, the man who had carried Kelechi through childhood, adolescence, and the lessons of life, watched quietly from the doorway. His eyes were steady, calm, and knowing. No words were needed. He had done what was right, not for recognition but because it was the right thing to do. Obinna approached Chike, placing a hand on the man's shoulder. "I owe you more than I can ever repay," he said, voice thick with emotion. "For raising my son, for protecting him, for showing me what it truly means to care." Chike shook his head gently. "Love is stronger than titles, sir. Blood is not the only bond. He is your son and he knows it. That is enough." The words sank deep into Obinna's heart. The empire he had built, the wealth he had amassed, the deals he had executed, all of it suddenly seemed pale in comparison to the gravity of this moment. Life had given him a lesson more valuable than any contract. Presence mattered more than power, love mattered more than legacy. The slow build of a bond. Over the following weeks, father and son began the careful, deliberate work of truly knowing each other. They ate meals together, not as master and servant, not as employer and employee, but as a father and son discovering the rhythm of family for the first time. They walked through the gardens, noting the flowers, the sunlight dancing across the fountains, and the laughter of birds that seemed to echo the new warmth in the mansion. Late into the night they shared stories. Obinna listened, really listened, to the life Kelechi had lived, the patience he had been taught, the struggles he had endured, the lessons of kindness and humility learned in the absence of his father. Kelechi in turn learned about Obinna, not the man who had abandoned a family, but the man who had faced his past, now striving to grow, to understand, to connect. There were moments of awkwardness, hesitations, and unspoken questions. But there were also moments of joy, shared laughter, and a sense of healing that neither had anticipated. Obinna no longer commanded attention. He earned it, one careful step at a time, through sincerity, presence, and openness. The empire redefined. As time passed, Kelechi began taking on responsibilities within the family business, not out of entitlement, not because of legacy alone, but because he had earned it through wisdom, intelligence, and integrity. Obinna watched with a quiet pride, not the pride of power or authority, but the pride of a father seeing his son rise, knowing that he had been shaped not just by wealth, but by love, sacrifice, and patience. Chike remained a constant presence, a silent anchor, the man whose sacrifices had ensured that the family's future would be grounded in care and responsibility. Every glance, every nod, every quiet word of guidance reminded Obinna of the debt that could never fully be repaid. The final lesson. One evening, as Lagos stretched endlessly below, bathed in the golden light of dusk, Obinna and Kelechi stood together on the balcony of the mansion. The city lights twinkled like stars fallen to earth, a reflection of the vast world both had navigated in very different ways. "I thought success meant wealth, power, control," Obinna said, voice reflective. "But I see now, it means being present, loving, learning, humbling yourself to what truly matters." Kelechi nodded. "And sometimes, destiny waits for us to grow, waits for us to be ready. Blood matters, yes, but so does sacrifice, love, and choice." Obinna's lips curved into a genuine smile, the first in years that was unburdened by pride or pretense. "You are right, my son. And I am ready to be the father I should have been." They stood together, united not by coincidence, not by obligation, but by enduring truths of love, courage, and redemption. Sometimes the greatest inheritance is not wealth, power, or prestige. Sometimes it is love, patience, and the courage to face your mistakes. Sometimes the child you abandoned returns, not to punish but to heal. Blood may connect us, but it is sacrifice, humility, and love that truly make a family. And in that truth, the poorest driver, the abandoned child, and the billionaire found a new beginning, together, whole and ready for the future. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a like. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our next captivating story filled with love, lessons, and unforgettable moments. Until our next story.